Hey everyone, it's Mojaxx back in the DJcity UK lab. A while back here on the channel, I did a couple of videos about Pioneer DJ's Pro DJ Link system, the way they connect all of their stuff together. Now, most of the information in those videos is still relevant today, but with the advent of new versions of the software and new hardware that's come along, there have been some changes, some different ways of working, and some improvements. So I thought we would revisit the topic today, as I currently have the CDJ3000s and the DJM-V10 here in the lab. Well, there's going to be no better opportunity than this. So let's get to it. Pro DJ Link made its first appearance on the CDJ2000 back in 2009. The introduction of the Ethernet port on the rear made it possible to link multiple players together and share a music library on a USB drive or SD card between them. In the intervening years, the ways of working with Pro DJ Link have expanded, but that's still the baseline function around which everything else has developed. Not all of Pioneer DJ's media players released since the original 2000 have featured Pro DJ Link, but there have been a massive number which have, even before we get to all-in-ones. If you see that Ethernet socket on the rear, then Pro DJ Link is supported. I'm using the latest CDJ3000s for this demo, but all of the players scrolling past will let you do the basic library sharing, which is what we'll look at to begin with. As we go through this video, I need to make one thing very clear. None of what I'm discussing is actually going to carry audio from the players to the mixer. That's always handled by the audio connections, the analog or digital RCA plugs on the rear. As you'll see, it can be important for those to correlate with the link connections you make, but they are always separate. I'll be using the term Ethernet quite a lot in this video. Pro DJ Link is Pioneer DJ's own protocol, but it does work over a traditional local area network, or LAN. It sends packets of data across that network, which standard networking hardware can handle. So the main thing you need to know is this: the cables required are standard Cat5 or Cat6 Ethernet cables. I'm sure Cat7 etc. will work as well, but I don't own any to test with and they're pointless for this use. So if you want to buy cables for Pro DJ Link usage, I'd recommend that you just pick up any old regular Cat6 cables from Amazon or your local computer store. Whatever kind of linking you're about to do, the first step is to ensure that the player numbers don't clash. Each player must have its own identity within the Pro DJ Link network, 1 to 4 on everything up to the CDJ3000, which supports 6. Choosing a player number is done in a similar way on all players. Holding the menu button opens up the utility menu and the setting is found in there. You can either select a specific number or choose auto. Auto is fine unless you're getting a mixer involved, which we'll be looking at later. Either way, just make sure each player has a different number showing when connected. You might find that the option to change the number is not available, and that means you haven't disconnected everything. The player number can only be changed when there's nothing hooked up, either directly to the unit or via link. So really, the first question to ask is, why are we bothering to link players in the first place? What benefits do we get from doing so? Now, in this case, I've gone for the simplest Pro DJ Link setup possible. I've got 2 players and they are connected with a single Ethernet cable going between the 2. Just that's it, 1 cable, that's it, linking directly. Now I've got my USB stick. I've loaded up this USB stick with music via Rekordbox. I've exported from Rekordbox. And that brings with it a lot of benefits, which we'll see. But yeah, I've exported it, so I'm not just pulling from files. I'm going to put it into player number 1. It's going to load up. Now, on the older players, you have physical source buttons to the left of the screen. So you will have like USB, SD, Rekordbox, it said link, and so on. But on the CDJ3000s, we have a fancy source menu. So I can go in there and I can see the connected sources, and I can load my settings. This is another reason you want to use Rekordbox, is that you can have your own personal settings for the players, which will then be loaded to any players that you use when you're connected to that stick. So in this case, it's going to switch the pitch range, it's putting the master tempo on, and it's chosen quantize to be active, etc. This is all stuff that I set up inside Rekordbox. And we can see we've got the USB stick over here, but if I hit the source over here, it's found it via the link. And again, I can load my settings. You can't load your settings when a track is loaded and playing. You have to have nothing playing in order to be able to load your settings, but you can do it with any of the players right back to the 2000 Nexus, original 2000 Nexus. So there we go. We've got my settings loaded to both now. We can see the same device is attached on both sides, and I can select that as my source. So there we go. I have just a few playlists and stuff on here. Let me load up a track. So I've loaded a track over here. I'm going to do the same over here. So I'm going to playlist and load a track and off we go. So now we are playing music from one stick on both players, which obviously makes life easier in terms of not needing to have two USB sticks. And I have the same library on both. I can browse through all the different playlists that I have on the stick, and I can do that on both players, all there, and I've got access to all that music on both players. But there are other things that go on then as well, because we are connected. So we can see, if I go into the browse again and go into this playlist, we can see that Hear Me Say, which is the track playing over here, has turned green. And that's to show you that it's been played. This is like in other software, like Serato DJ Pro does this as well. The track will change color to show you that it's been played. Very useful in a very long set or something to know easily at a glance, okay, I've played this track, I haven't played that track. That works really nicely. The other thing that will happen is that you've got this traffic light indicator, and this is again, I think from the CDJ 2000 Nexus onwards, it will show you your tracks that have a compatible key with the master player. So right now the master player, the master is lit there. This is the one that's been playing the longest. This is the master, and so this is in 7B. So if I go over here and I want to choose a track that is going to be compatible with that, there aren't too many because I can go 7A or 7B. So let's choose this one. I know that because that key is green, that means, yeah, this is going to be a compatible key with the track that's playing in the master player. So I'm going to hit that there and press play. And again, as we scroll up, we can see they've gone green. All right, so these are tracks that have been played. That is my history there. So again, just giving you information at a glance that you wouldn't normally have if you didn't link the two players together. The data also goes back and forth. It's a two-way feed. You're not just taking music from here and using it over here. You are sending info back and forth. So on this track, for example, let's say I want to get an extra hot cue and an extra memory point. So I'm going to hit got hot cue A there, but I'm going to beat jump in to the end of the intro. I'm going to hit cue, going to hit memory. So that's a new memory point there. And I'm going to hit a hot cue there as well. So now I have two hot cues and two memory points on this particular track. So if I was to go back in, let's load a different track over here. And I'm going to load that track over here on this side. And now we can see we have two memory points and two hot cues on this track. That's been fed back from the linked player to the master player, the one that's got the actual USB media in there. And of course, this will go with different things. So if I have another stick I want to put in there, I can play a track from this stick over on this player, and whilst I'm playing a track from this stick on this player. And same, I can add in two SD cards. So with two players, if you have SD card slots as well, you can have 4 different media sources attached and just play from each one back and forth as you like. They will always feed that data back and forth. There are more things as well with this. We've also got the tag list. This is something I don't see that many people using. I don't think it's completely unknown, but it's not the most common thing that I see in use. With the tracks, you can go in, and let's say I decide I don't want to play this track now. I want to play it later on in my set. So I'm going to hit tag track, and this has been the same since the very first CDJ 2000. So I'm going to hit that tag track. That's added it to the tag list. Likewise, I want to play this one as well. Oh yeah, that's a great track. I want to play that later. Again, hit tag. We see we've got a little indicator, a little tick there. That's on most of the players. You will see that come up. So let's go now into my tag list. There it is. So if I hit tag list, I've now got my tag list of stuff that I want to play later on. Go back to browsing into another playlist or whatever, but yet my tag list is there. Likewise, that tag list is also over here. And if you have multiple sources attached to different players, then you have multiple tag lists available to you as well. So tag list is a very cool feature. The other things you can do does include sync as well. If you're a sync user, no complaints there. That's entirely up to you. So we can go in and I can hit beat sync. That's on the master deck, and hit beat sync over here. Now that's synced up together. And we can also use the sync functionality for instant doubles. So if I hold down the beat sync, then it will load up, and now I've got instant doubles. I've got the same track on both decks, and I can do, you know, phasing back and forth, etc. Very straightforward to do that. Again, we see we've got that little tick there. That's showing you that it's in the tag list. If you're playing a track and you decide you want to add that to the tag list, then I'm playing it. Yeah, okay, that sounds great. I don't want to play it now. Hit the tag button, and again, it's going to pop up in that tag list. So you can access the tag list really from anywhere at all. This is really nice in terms of just getting the most out of the players. If you're not using the link functionality, you are going to be missing out on all of this stuff. So the played tracks, the traffic light for the key, the ability to use the tag list, the ability to use sync and instant doubles, etc. this is where, you know, having your players linked up for me is just essential. Of course, there's one big limitation to linking players directly to each other, and that becomes apparent once you start to think about adding a third or fourth deck. Each player only has one Ethernet port, so you can't daisy chain them together, and that means you need to get a switch involved, the equivalent effectively of a USB hub but for Ethernet. As with the cables themselves, this doesn't need to be anything special. A 4 or 8 port Ethernet switch can be had for $20 or less. It's exactly the same device that you'd use to expand a home wired network. A quick side note on speed. The 100 megabit standard is plenty fast enough for use with Pro DJ Link, and historically that's all the players have supported anyway. But the CDJ3000s do now support gigabit Ethernet, which is a lot faster. As you'll see when we go through this video, there is a lot of expansion potential for Pro DJ Link, so if I was buying a Switch today, I'd definitely get a gigabit one just for future proofing. They cost basically the same anyway. You want a switch which is unmanaged. That lets all the devices just kind of sort themselves out. High-end switches are often managed and will therefore require extra work, which for our needs is just unnecessary. Connection is very simple. You plug each player into the switch and they all talk to each other, just as if they were connected directly. There's really nothing more to it than that. So let's add a layer of complexity and get a link-enabled mixer involved. There are 5 mixers which support Pro DJ Link in the normal way with a single link port. The DJM 900 Nexus, the 900 SRT, the 900 Nexus 2, the DJM V10 and the V10 LF. Those will need to be connected to your Ethernet switch along with the players. There are also the more unusual mixers which feature integrated Ethernet hubs, the DJM 2000, 2000 Nexus and the DJM Tor 1. Those can be the easiest to set up, as you can leave the player numbers on auto, plug the link cables into the correctly numbered port, and there's nothing else to worry about. Okay, so what benefits do we get from linking our mixer to the Pro DJ Link network as well? Well, there are some definite advantages as far as I'm concerned. The first one, you have to make sure obviously that your system is connected properly. So this player is player number 3, it's assigned to channel 3, and I've got the digital output coming from the player into the digital input on channel 3 on the mixer. And this one likewise, player number is number 4, audio is going to channel 4. So when we play stuff, these will come through. You can see, press play there, press play there. So that's all working fine. But why do we want then the mixer link? Well, firstly, with the DJM V10, you can load your settings for the mixer from the CDJs, from the 3000s. That's a pretty neat function, but kind of niche. But on a more general level, you've got the on-air display, and I find this really, really useful, especially, you know, in a dark club, you're working with 3 or 4 CDJs. It can get a bit confusing sometimes which deck is actually live, which one can you turn off, which one can't, especially, again, doing crossover, like with changeovers between DJs. You know, for me, it's like, what decks can't I touch right now because the previous DJ is currently using them? Well, how do you tell that? Because the jog wheels go red. So when this deck, this CDJ is live, this jog wheel illumination goes from white to red. And when I pull the fader down, the master does need to be up for this to happen. If you have the master fully turned down, it doesn't do anything because the deck isn't actually live. But yeah, I've got the master on, put it up, and the LED goes red. Cross fader over as well, the LED goes back to white. So it's just a nice, simple visual way of telling which deck is currently live and playing to your audience. Now, if you don't have those jog wheel LEDs, then you do generally have an on-air display. On the more recent CDJs at least, like an XDJ 1000 for example, you have the player number and you have a little indication. So it's flashing away right there. So you can still see that the player is live or not. It's just not quite as visually obvious as having the big red LEDs in the middle. So whenever you see, you know, a system where DJs are using a Pioneer DJ mixer and multiple CDJs and they don't have those red LEDs, that means chances are everything hasn't been linked properly. It's a bit of a visual sort of giveaway. But yeah, very useful for me. More useful perhaps is the ability to synchronize your effects. Now, normally Pioneer DJ's effects, they pick up auto BPM from audio, so they'll detect according to what's being played through the audio. But when you've got the link all done properly, they can be quantized exactly to the beat. So I'm going to turn on this delay, this echo. And if I move the BPM up and down on the player, you can see the number is actually changing. And it's following instantly. There's no delay, it doesn't have to catch up or anything, it's just going with it. So this is great if you're doing, you know, transitions between different BPMs and you want an echo or something to track with what you're doing. Of course, you can disable it, you can tap your own tempo if the BPM's wrong or something, you know, you don't have to use it. But for me, I use this all the time. It's one of the big advantages of having a full linked system like this. For me, it's just superb. Especially for someone who uses a lot of rhythmic effects like I do, like, you know, echoes and delays and so on. It really levels up the effects inside the mixer. Just absolutely fantastic. You can have two computers as part of the Pro DJ Link network, both talking directly to the hardware at the same time. What we're talking about here is connecting via link export mode, which is distinct from performance mode. Performance mode in Rekordbox is more like traditional DJ software. The computer is doing all of the work of processing the audio and the control, and the players are just being used as control surfaces and possibly audio interfaces. When using link export, the computer is doing very little work at all. It's just providing audio data and metadata to the players, which then do all of the grunt work themselves. Think of it like a giant USB stick, but one with access to your whole library, a big screen to see all of that library, and the ability to search with a physical QWERTY keyboard. This might not seem like such a big deal with hardware like the CDJ3000s, which also have big screens and QWERTY keyboards for track searching, but some older models, I'm thinking particularly of like the CDJ900 Nexus, have very clunky input methods for search, so this can be quite a transformative experience when using hardware like that. To set it up, you just need to put Rekordbox into export mode, make sure it's not in performance mode. Then to connect it to the Pro DJ Link network, you have some options. The simplest method is to connect your computer to the network switch with an Ethernet cable. If you have an Ethernet port on your computer, that's great, but if you don't, almost all modern computers without one will also work with a simple cheap USB to Ethernet dongle. Once connected, the link button will show up in the bottom left corner of Rekordbox. You click on it and you're good to go. If it doesn't show up, that's usually a sign that your computer's firewall or some other security feature is blocking the connection. You may need to switch off your Wi-Fi too. These issues are more common on Windows in my experience, but there are plenty of FAQs on Pioneer DJ support pages to help out. I've never not managed to get it working after a bit of tweaking. As soon as you click on the link button, things are up and running. You can select the computer as a source on the players and either browse from the player as you would with a normal USB drive, or browse your library on the computer and drag and drop tracks to the players. One thing I'd suggest if you find yourself doing the second method a lot is to go into the keyboard settings in Rekordbox and set up hotkeys to load the tracks to each player, much more efficient than dragging and dropping. It's also important to make sure that your player numbers match the physical layout of the players in the booth for this, as otherwise you could end up loading to the wrong one if you aren't paying very close attention. That Ethernet method works for all of the link compatible players, but there is another option if you're using some more recent models, and that is to connect in link export mode via USB. This is supported on the CDJ2000 Nexus 2, the XDJ1000 Mark II, the CDJ Tour 1 and the CDJ3000. It's important to note that this does not work through the link-enabled mixers. The USB ports on the top of those do not support link. Instead, you're connecting the computer to one of the players in your link network. You'll need a regular USB cable which goes from your computer to a USB-B plug, the squarish one, as you're connecting to the back of the player, not into the top where you'd normally connect a USB stick. Once that physical connection is made, the setup is the same as if you were running via an Ethernet cable. It's not a function that I use often, but it can come in handy if you, say, run out of ports on your Ethernet switch, or you don't have a USB to Ethernet adapter, or you can't physically access the switch at a gig. Now, the last thing about linking the mixer that I want to mention, it kind of seems a bit more niche. I don't see people using it that much, and I think it's generally because up until the CDJ3000s, the only way to really use it was to have your computer linked. So you're playing via Pro DJ Link from your computer. It's a great way of working, but not the most common way of working. But I'll show you how it works. On all of the link-enabled mixers, you have Link Queue. So in this case, it's a little button there next to the rest of the queue stuff on the DJM V10. So I can be playing a track on this CDJ, and I can be playing a track on this CDJ. Let's just sync them. Okay, so they're both playing, right? I'm currently queuing the master. But let's say I've got that rolling and now I want to preview something else. Well, you can do that. So I'm going to turn off the master queue. These are still playing out. You can see the jog wheels are red, the VU meters are going. I'm going to click on link queue. I'm going to go to my computer where I've got Rekordbox open in link export mode, and I'm going to click on one of these preview waveforms. And now I'm listening to that track being sent over link. These are still live. So if I go back, that one's still playing. That one's still playing. But if I go hit link again, I'm listening to something being previewed from my computer. For me, this is, the more I play with it, the more I like it. It's a really nice feature. So I can go through, I can skip through, you know, touch different places in the waveform. I can listen to multiple different tracks. All the while, these two are still playing away. Absolutely, you know, don't need any intervention at all. They're just playing. So I could have one playing out on the master, and I could have one queued up ready to go. That would be another example. So I've got this track is currently playing, this one's queued up, but I want to check out another track in my library. Well, I can just hit link queue, and I can do that from these waveforms, or even from the large player itself inside the software. And now I've loaded up there on the player. I'm going to hit spacebar to start that one off, and now I'm listening to that one. Again, these are still playing. But I'm listening to something else that I can go through, I can set my cue points and loop points and memory points and all this kind of stuff directly here. I can skip around in these. You know, if my beat grid is off, I can adjust my beat grid. All the while, these players are still just playing away. And for me, that's a very cool feature and something I've just not dived into enough. Now, one of the reasons, yeah, you do have to have the computer connected on the older hardware. That makes it kind of less useful. Not everyone wants to play with a computer. Let's say you're playing off a USB stick or an SD card. You don't want to do that. Can you still do link preview? Well, with the CDJ3000, you now can. So these two decks are still playing. You can see the VU meters are going. I'm going to hit browse, and there are waveforms on the screen. I have the preview available to me. So I'm going to touch, again, we've got link queue enabled. I'm going to touch on those waveforms, scrub through. And this player is still playing another track. There it is. I'm still playing away. But I'm previewing something else over link. And that doesn't depend on any particular source. Whatever's plugged in and playing here. Could be a USB stick over here. Could be an SD card in here. Can be the computer. I'm doing it from the computer right now. But that's a really nice way of sort of increasing that functionality with the CDJ3000s in particular, and I'm sure that will make its way to more of the newer players as they get released over the coming years. But yeah, link preview, definitely worth checking out, something that not enough people mess with, something that I am becoming a big fan of. So far, we've been playing around in a locked-off sandbox, working within our own network that we've built dedicated to Pro DJ Link. But guess what? As Pro DJ Link uses regular LAN technology, that means you can also connect all the hardware to an existing local area network too. For example, in the DJcity UK lab, we have a 24-port network switch that connects our LAN to the larger one operated by the building owner. We then have a bunch of Cat6 cables running all around the lab from that, going to computers and whatnot, and when I want to connect Pro DJ Link hardware together, I just use one of those cables. We also have a wireless access point connected. This opens up some possibilities. Firstly, it means that you can hardwire your players and mixer to your existing LAN switch, or even wireless router. You might not even need to buy a switch if your router is close to your DJ setup and has some free LAN ports. And secondly, it means we can get Wi-Fi involved. I'd actually forgotten about this until I had the 3000s and V10 connected to our LAN one day, turned on my computer connected to the Wi-Fi access point, and the link button showed up in Rekordbox's export mode. Now, no CDJ or XDJ players feature Wi-Fi, so you can't connect those to the network without cables, but having the ability to link a computer to the Pro DJ Link network wirelessly is pretty neat and remarkably reliable. Keep in mind when we're talking about Wi-Fi that the only players in the line which cache the full track to memory are the CDJ3000s, so it might not be wise to use this method with other players in an environment that you don't have full control of, but for home or studio use, it is a very smooth experience. The functionality you get is largely the same as when you're hardwired, even though the players treat a computer that's connected via Wi-Fi as a mobile device, not as a computer in the normal way. Mobile device Mojaxx, you say? Yep, well, we aren't even close to done yet. Rekordbox for iOS is a very cool app for managing your music, especially when used in conjunction with the cloud library in Rekordbox 6. And yes, that too can be connected to your Pro DJ Link network, either wired or via Wi-Fi. Keep in mind that this is only on the iOS version, not the Android one. The first option is to connect it via USB. As with a computer, you'll need to go into a port on the rear of a player, not on the top. To make that connection, you'll need a camera connection kit or similar to go from Lightning or USB-C, depending on which iOS device you're using, to USB-B. The port on the rear of the player doesn't provide power back to your iOS device, so you'll need an adapter like the current iPhone camera connection kit, which lets you plug in a charger at the same time. The older version of that adapter did not. Once connected, you can browse the tracks downloaded to the Rekordbox app via the players themselves, or load directly from the iPhone or iPad, much like you would on a computer. Keep in mind that not every player supports Pro DJ Link via the USB cable, as discussed previously, but that's not your only option. You can hook up a USB to Ethernet dongle into your camera connection kit, and that will work with a lot more hardware. Whether hooking up via USB or Ethernet, you'll need to make sure the Wi-Fi is switched off on your iOS device, as having it turned on will prevent it using the wired connection for networking. But of course, you can forego cables and use Wi-Fi to connect your iOS device to the Pro DJ Link network too. As with using a computer via Wi-Fi, it's not something I'd necessarily recommend for gigs unless you have CDJ3000s with that full track caching. But as with using a computer via Wi-Fi, it does work really well. As a side note, this video might seem like a Pioneer DJ love fest, but I do have one serious criticism to make. The fact that Rekordbox for iOS is still not iPad native at the time of making this video is a bit ridiculous. I could easily see using an iPad being my preferred way of performing with Pro DJ Link if it was, but using a blown up iPhone app on an iPad just isn't the one. Moving on, let's talk about all-in-ones, which I haven't really mentioned yet. Ignoring the really ancient models, there are 4 which we'll discuss here. As a 4-channel device, the flagship XDJ-XZ has full Pro DJ Link implementation with 3 Ethernet ports, 2 for adding on extra players and 1 for a computer or other extensions. As well as using the Ethernet port, you can also connect a computer in link export mode via the USB port on the rear, just like with recent CDJs. All of the 2-channel all-in-ones don't support any extra devices over link, as you might expect. They can only connect to linked computers or iOS devices. The first XDJ-RX has an Ethernet port, so it can be linked that way, but it can't be linked via USB. Then the more recent XDJ-RR and XDJ-RX2 don't feature Ethernet ports at all, but can be linked with a computer or iOS device via link over USB. Due to the nature of the hardware, this is generally all you're going to need, although it does preclude you from using some extensions of the Pro DJ Link technology, which we'll be getting to. Before we do that, let's switch up and talk about performance mode for a moment. In my time with the CDJ3000s, I've mainly been using Rekordbox in performance mode with the players controlling the software via HID. This isn't my preferred way of working, but at present it's the only way to use streaming services like BeatSource and Beatport Link in the Pioneer DJ ecosystem. Export mode just doesn't support it. So what's all that got to do with Pro DJ Link? Well, with the CDJ2000 Nexus 2s, the CDJ3000s, the DJM900 Nexus 2 and DJM V10 mixers, players which are linked to the mixer can be automatically connected to HID control without any extra USB cables. You plug the USB from your computer in Rekordbox performance mode to the mixer, and the players will automatically see the software and allow you to connect just using link. You may wish to change up the player numbers depending on how you like the mixer to be laid out, but it's a hugely convenient way of working. If, for example, you want to use performance mode at a venue which has already got a Pro DJ Link network set up properly, all you need to do is plug in a single USB cable to the mixer and you're all set. The next thing to talk about is Rekordbox lighting. If you're not aware, this is Pioneer DJ's take on automatic synchronized DMX lighting, which takes its cues directly from Rekordbox. To activate it, you'll need the RB-DMX1 interface, which connects from USB on your computer to a regular 3-pin DMX output. This can be used with the software in performance mode as standard, but also if you have CDJ3000s, you can use it over Pro DJ Link. There's one prerequisite to make it work to its full capacity. The tracks being played on the 3000s must have been analysed with phrase information. That phrase information is then sent via link to the software, and the light show will be fully synchronised to tracks playing on the 3000s. Setup is fairly simple. Hook up your computer to the Pro DJ Link network with the RBDMX1 connected. Enable Pro DJ Link lighting in the preferences and switch over to that mode. One important thing to understand, the tracks played on the 3000s do not have to be in the Rekordbox library on the computer, but they do need to have been analysed with phrase information. So you could use it this way in a venue, for example, but for best results the DJs playing will need to have ticked phrase analysis when they analyse their tracks in Rekordbox before export. You can choose which channel is active in the lighting manually or via keyboard shortcuts, but since Rekordbox 6.5.1 there is also automatic deck switching when also using a correctly linked DJM V10, not the LF, DJM Tour 1 and DJM 900 Nexus 2. Ultimately, this is a fairly niche use of Pro DJ Link at the moment, simply because of the hardware requirements, but that might change in the future, and it's worth being aware of because it is very cool. Finally, we'll talk about the expansions beyond Pioneer DJ's own hardware and software. Firstly, there is the official way using either the company's Pro DJ Link Bridge app or Show Control from TC Supply. The Bridge app does need updating for the latest hardware at the time of making this video, but I'm sure that will come soon. This stuff is rather deep, so I'll look into it more in future videos, but to summarise, they offer ways to synchronise your Pioneer DJ kit with software from companies like Archaos, Avalights, Timecode, Green Hippo and Resolume. With Show Control you can even easily add Ableton Link to your Pro DJ Link setup, and their basic version is just $50. So whilst running things like SMPTE timecode to ArtNet might be a bit beyond the requirements of an average DJ, there is still potential in this stuff for us normals too, and it's definitely worth investigating. On the slightly more homebrew end of things is stuff like the Track ID apps I've been looking at recently for use on streaming platforms like Twitch. I already looked at one here on the channel, ProLink Tools, and that works great, dropping into your Pro DJ Link network and extracting track info to display to your viewers. Whilst Pro DJ Link will always be a proprietary technology from Pioneer DJ, the fact that they don't lock it off completely to outside developers is a real credit to the company, I believe. Where will this tech go next? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. So there you go, look at some simple and more advanced ways of working with Pro DJ Link from Pioneer DJ. I do think it's worth knowing a little bit about this topic. Even if you don't own any of the hardware that works with Pro DJ Link, it's still worth having it in the back of your brain because, you know, at some point you're going to be at a gig, you're going to be at a club or a bar or a festival, and just knowing how to network two players together, for example, could get you or another DJ that you're working with out of trouble. So I think that's very useful knowledge to have. And if you own the hardware, then yeah, you really do need to understand it so you can get the very best out of what you've bought. Thanks for watching today. Make sure you subscribe for all our future tips, tricks and product reviews. I'll see you soon.